A poor girl hands a box of dolls to the doctor and begs, "Please, take it. It's all I have to save my mum." Hearing this, a young billionaire is frozen and breaks down when he discovers who the mother is. The hallways of Mercy General Hospital were a labyrinth of antiseptic smells and muffled voices. The fluorescent lights made everything seem colder, more distant. Sarah held the cardboard box tightly, as if it might slip from her small hands at any moment. 5 years old, she was only 5, but she carried the weight of the world on her narrow shoulders. Her brown eyes were red from crying, but she wasn't crying anymore. Now she had a mission. The box wasn't large. It would fit easily on a child's lap, and that's exactly where it was. Inside, her most cherished dolls slept in silence. The golden-haired doll she had received for her last birthday, the rag doll her mother had sewn by hand on a cold night, the tiny doll she always took to bed. All of them were there, everything she held most precious in the world. "Excuse me," Sarah said, tugging on the hem of a white coat worn by a doctor rushing past. The man stopped and looked down. His eyes softened when he saw the little girl, but there was a hurry in his expression. "Hi, little one. Are you lost?" "No, sir, I came to pay." The doctor frowned. "Pay for what?" Sarah lifted the box, offering it with both hands. "Please take this. It's all I have to save my mum. Her name is Anne. Anne Miller. A car hit her this morning." The words came out clear, determined, as if she had rehearsed the speech several times on her way there. "Little one, The doctor hesitated. "Where are your other family members?" "It's just the two of us. But I brought everything I have." Sarah shook the box gently. "My dolls are very pretty. The lady on the bus always says they're worth a lot of money." The doctor knelt to her level. His voice became gentler. "Sweetheart, that's not how it works. You need to talk to a family member, or I don't have anyone else." Sarah's voice trembled for the first time. "Please, Mr. Doctor, I know it's not much, but it's all I have. If you don't save my mum, I'll have nothing left in the world." It was at that moment that Matthew Sullivan, who was passing through the hallway, stopped. He hadn't intended to be there. In fact, he hated hospitals, always had. But his personal assistant had been in a car accident, and Matthew, in a rare moment of humanity, had decided to visit him personally instead of just sending expensive flowers. Matthew was the kind of man people recognized on the streets, not because he sought attention, but because it's hard not to notice someone who carries the weight of billions of dollars on his shoulders. At 35, he had built a financial empire that made other billionaires look small. But at that moment, standing in a hospital hallway, watching a 5-year-old girl offer her dolls as medical payment, Matthew felt smaller than ever. "Anne Miller," he said, before he even realized he had spoken. The doctor and Sarah turned to him. "Do you know my mom?" Sarah asked, her eyes lighting up for the first time. Matthew felt a strange tightness in his chest, a distant memory knocking on the door of his mind. Anne Miller. He knew that name. He knew it very well. "Doctor," Matthew addressed the physician, pulling his phone from his pocket. "Says, what is the status of patient Anne Miller?" "Sir, I can't discuss medical information with Matthew Sullivan." He extended his hand. "And this is my niece." It wasn't true, but he said it with such conviction that the doctor hesitated. "Mr. Sullivan, the situation is delicate. The patient suffered a head trauma and multiple fractures. She's in the ICU, but, well, there's the issue of payment. Without insurance or guarantees, I'm afraid that—" Matthew didn't let him finish. "Do your best. I'll pay for everything." The words came out without hesitation. Firm, final. Sarah dropped the box and ran to hug Matthew's leg. "Thank you." "Thank you," she repeated, clinging to him as if he were a life raft. Matthew looked down at the child clinging to him with all the strength her little arms could muster, and he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Something warm, something real. The doctor, visibly relieved, nodded quickly. "I'll inform the team immediately. The surgery can begin within an hour." When they were alone in the hallway, Matthew knelt beside Sarah. "Can you tell me what happened?" Sarah wiped her nose with the sleeve of her pink shirt. "Mommy was crossing the street. We were going to buy bread for breakfast. The car came really fast and—" She paused, taking a deep breath. "And Mommy pushed me away. The car only hit her. You saw everything, Sarah nodded. The ambulance took a long time. Mommy wouldn't wake up. There was blood. A lot of blood. Matthew felt anger rising within him. Anger at the reckless driver. Anger at the system that would leave a child alone in the world for lack of money. Anger at himself for taking so long to find Anne again. Sarah, you said your last name is Miller. It is, Sarah Miller. And you really know my mum? Matthew smiled for the first time that day. I do. I knew her when we were your age. You were friends? We were. Good friends. Sarah picked up the box of dolls from the floor and sat on the hallway bench. Matthew sat down next to her. Do you want to tell me about your dolls? Sarah opened the box carefully. This one is Emma, she showed the blonde doll. Mommy gave her to me for my birthday. And this is Luna, the rag doll. Mommy made her when I was scared to sleep alone. Your mom made this doll. Mommy knows how to do a lot of things. She cooks really well, knows how to fix the sink when it breaks, and always tells me stories before I go to sleep. Matthew watched Sarah talk about her mother. He saw the love in her eyes, the pure admiration of a child for the most important person in her life. Sarah, do you remember me asking about other relatives? Sarah's face fell slightly. It's just me and Mommy. It's always been this way. Matthew felt his chest tighten. Anne had always been strong, even when they were children. But raising a daughter alone, this wasn't the life she deserved. Are you hungry, Sarah? She nodded shyly. We didn't have breakfast today because of what happened. Matthew stood up and extended his hand to her. Come on. Let's find something for you to eat while the doctors take care of your mum. Sarah took his hand without hesitation. It was a small, warm hand that trusted him completely. They walked through the hospital corridors, Sarah carrying her box of dolls, Matthew carrying the weight of a responsibility he didn't know he was looking for. In the cafeteria, Matthew bought a sandwich and juice for Sarah. She ate slowly, chewing each bite carefully. Did you really know my mum when you were kids? She asked between bites. I did. We used to play together almost every day. What kind of games? Matthew smiled, remembering. Your mom loved to play hide and seek. She always found the best hiding spots. And we climbed trees, built forts with branches. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. Why? The question was simple, but the answer was complicated. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that sometimes life takes people down different paths? That sometimes you lose touch with the people who matter most? As sometimes people lose each other, Matthew said finally. But it doesn't mean they forget. Sarah nodded as if she understood perfectly. Mommy always says that important people never leave our hearts, even when they leave our lives. Matthew looked at that small, wise girl and knew that Anne had become an incredible mother. Sarah, while your mom is recovering, you're going to stay with me, okay? Really? Really? We're family now. Sarah smiled for the first time since she had arrived at the hospital, a genuine smile that lit up her whole face. Do you think Mommy will be okay? Matthew took her small hand in his. I think your mom is a very strong woman. And she has you waiting for her. That makes all the difference. They sat in silence for a few minutes, Sarah finishing her sandwich, Matthew processing everything that had happened that day. An ordinary morning had turned into something completely different. He had found Anne again, or rather he had found Anne's daughter. A brave little girl who had offered everything she had in the world to save the person she loved most. And now, for the first time in years, Matthew Sullivan wasn't thinking about business, investments or profits. He was thinking about a woman he had known as a child and her daughter who had just trusted him completely. It was strange how life worked. How a chance event could change everything in a matter of minutes. Mr. Matthew, Sarah pulled him from his thoughts. You can just call me Matthew. Matthew, do you think Mommy will be happy to know you found each other? Matthew smiled. I hope so, Sarah. I really hope so. The next 2 days passed in a blur of hospital corridors and waiting rooms. Matthew had cancelled all his meetings, something he had never done in his 15-year career. His assistants called constantly, but he just said he was dealing with a family emergency, and it was true, in a way. Sarah had become his shadow. Wherever he went, she went too, always carrying her box of dolls. The hospital had provided a room for her to rest. but she preferred to stay in the ICU waiting room, as close to her mother as possible. Matthew brought a blanket from the hotel where he was staying. He watched Sarah wrap herself in it on the waiting room sofa, her big eyes observing every move of the doctors and nurses who passed by. On the morning of the second day, Matthew appeared with a bag from the cafeteria. "Hungry?" he asked. Sarah nodded shyly. She had been quieter since yesterday, as if the reality of the situation was finally weighing on her small shoulders. Matthew pulled a chocolate muffin, a sandwich, some fruit, and a glass of warm milk from the bag. "Wow, that's a lot of food," Sarah said, her eyes widening. "You need to eat well to stay strong," Matthew replied, sitting next to her. Sarah picked up the muffin and looked at it carefully. "Mommy always says chocolate in the morning isn't good," she said, but took a bite anyway. "Sometimes we have to break the rules," Matthew replied, "especially when things are tough." Sarah chewed slowly, savoring each bite as if it were the last sweet treat in the world. Matthew noticed the way she ate, carefully, without rushing, like someone who wasn't sure when the next meal would be. "Matthew?" "Yes?" "Do you have kids?" The question caught him by surprise. He paused his coffee sip. "No." "I don't." "Why not?" Matthew smiled. Children had this unique ability to ask direct questions without worrying about awkwardness. "Never found the right person, I guess. Mommy always says that when you find the right person, you know right away. Your mum is a wise woman." "She's the smartest person I know," Sarah said with absolute conviction. "She was studying in college to be a teacher." Matthew noticed the past tense. "Was," Sarah nodded, fiddling with the muffin crumbs. "She stopped when I was born. Mommy loved studying. She was really good at math and science." Her voice grew smaller. "She always says she wanted to teach little kids like me. Why did she stop?" "Because of me," Sarah said simply. "Our babies are a lot of work, and Mommy didn't have anyone to take care of me while she studied." Matthew felt his chest tighten, seeing that child carry a guilt that wasn't hers. "Sarah, listen. Your mom chose to be your mom because you are the most important thing in her life. That's not your fault, that's love." Sarah looked at him with shining eyes. "Really? Really? And I bet she doesn't regret it one bit." Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing his words. Then she ate another piece of the muffin. "Mommy doesn't have a job right now," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. Matthew kept his expression neutral, but felt a pang in his chest. "For how long?" "A few months. She worked at a store, but the store closed." Sarah hesitated, as if she were breaking a rule by talking about it. "That's why things are tough at home." "Tough? How?" Sarah looked around to make sure no one was listening. "Sometimes Mommy worries about money. I hear her talking to herself about bills when she thinks I'm asleep." She paused, biting her lip. "And we eat pasta for many days in a row." Matthew clenched his fists without realizing it. "Did your mum tell you these things?" "No. Mommy never talks about these things with me. She always says everything is fine, that I don't need to worry." Sarah looked at him with a maturity that was painful to see. But I notice things." "What kind of things?" "I notice when she gets sad looking at the letters that come in the mail. She thinks I don't see, but I do." Sarah played with the edge of the blanket, and when we go to the grocery store, she counts the coins before putting things in the cart. Sometimes she picks something up and then puts it back. Sarah's innocence was being lost too soon, and Matthew felt a cold anger grow inside him. Not anger at Anne, but at the situation, at the circumstances that forced a child to carry adult worries. "And there's something else," Sarah continued softly. "Sometimes Mommy doesn't eat. She says she's not hungry, but I think she gives me her food." Matthew had to swallow hard. "Sarah, have you ever talked to your mum about noticing these things?" She shook her head vehemently. "Never. Mommy works so hard to protect me. She doesn't sleep well because she stays up thinking about how to solve the problems. I don't want her to know that I know and get even more worried." Matthew looked at that 5-year-old girl protecting her mother in the same way her mother protected her, and he felt something break inside him. "You're a very special girl, you know that," Sarah smiled shyly. "Mommy always says that. She says I'm her greatest achievement, and she's right." Sarah finished the muffin and picked up the sandwich. She ate half and then carefully wrapped the rest. "For later," she explained. Matthew realized she was saving food, a habit she had learned out of necessity. "Sarah, you can eat it all. I'll bring more if you want." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Sarah unwrapped the sandwich and ate the rest, but still made sure to save the fruit for later. During the afternoon, they talked about lighter things. Sarah told him about school, about her favorite teacher, about the books she liked to read. Matthew noticed how smart she was, curious, full of questions about the world. "Matthew, what was your favorite food when you were a kid?" "My mum made a carrot cake that was amazing, with chocolate frosting." "Does your mum still make cake?" "No, she passed away when I was a teenager." Sarah immediately became serious. "I'm sorry. Thank you. Were you alone?" "For a while, yes." Sarah reached out her small hand and touched his arm. "That must have been very sad. I don't know what I would do if I lost Mommy." Matthew looked at that little girl offering comfort to an adult and felt something move inside his chest. It was hard, but it passed. Mommy always says that sad things pass, but the good memories stay forever. "Your mom is right. She always is," Sarah said seriously. "That's why I'm sure she'll find a way to solve our problems. She always does." Matthew admired the unshakable faith Sarah had in her mother, even knowing the difficulties they faced. At the end of the afternoon, a nurse approached with news. "Mr. Sullivan, Mrs. Miller is responding well to treatment. The doctors are optimistic." Matthew felt a relief he hadn't expected. "Thank you." Sarah clung to his arm. "Does that mean Mommy will be okay?" "It means she's fighting, and she's a strong fighter," Matthew answered carefully. Sarah smiled for the first time that day. "Mommy is the strongest person I know." On the third day, Matthew made a decision. "Sarah, I need to leave for a few hours. I'm going to get some things for you and check on some things for your mom." Sarah looked at him with concern. "Are you coming back?" "I'm coming back, I promise." "Nurse Lisa will stay here with you, okay?" Sarah nodded reluctantly, but Matthew saw the fear in her eyes. Fear of being abandoned again. "Hey," he knelt to her level. "I promise I'll be back. And you know how I know I can promise that?" "How?" "Because you're important to me now, and I don't abandon people who are important to me." Sarah smiled and hugged him tightly. "Okay, but come back soon." Matthew took a taxi to the address he had discovered from the hospital documents, 247 Maple Street, apartment 12. The journey was like a trip back in time. He recognized several streets, some shops that still existed from his childhood. The neighborhood had changed. Some houses were well kept, others clearly in need of repair. It was a working-class neighborhood, where people did the best they could with what they had. The building was small, 3 stories, with exposed bricks and small windows. The paint was peeling in some places, and there were some windows with tape holding cracks together. It wasn't luxurious, but it was structurally sound. Matthew went up to the second floor and stopped in front of door 12. The door was painted a light blue, but the paint was faded. There was a small vase of dried flowers hanging, a touch of hope amidst the simplicity. Matthew used the key he had gotten from the building manager, explaining that he was family and needed to get some things for Sarah. When he opened the door, the apartment left him speechless. It was small, just 2 rooms, a living room, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom. But what impacted him most was not the size, it was the emptiness. The living room had a beige sofa that had seen better days. One of the cushions was torn and had been carefully hand-mended, but the patch was still visible. The coffee table had some children's books, but when Matthew flipped through them, he saw they were all from the public library, with return labels glued to the covers. The television was small and old, clearly second-hand. There were no expensive decorations, no visible valuables. The walls had photographs of Sarah at various ages, all printed on plain paper, some already fading. Matthew noticed that the most recent photos were from over a year ago. Anne probably didn't have money to develop new ones. But it was in the kitchen that Matthew felt the true impact of the situation. The refrigerator, when he opened it, was practically empty. It had only some leftover pasta in a plastic container, a small piece of cheese that seemed to have been there for days. and half a gallon of milk that was close to its expiration date. The vegetable drawer was empty. The freezer had only a few ice trays. Matthew closed the refrigerator and opened the pantry. A can of tomato sauce, half a package of pasta, a box of cereal with only the bottom covered, an almost empty jar of peanut butter. That was it. That was all the food in the apartment. Matthew leaned on the counter, feeling his stomach turn. Sarah had talked about eating pasta for days on end, but seeing the reality of the situation was completely different. There were no options here. There was no hidden variety. There was no abundance. It was then that he saw the pile of papers on the counter. They weren't bills organized in a drawer or hidden away. They were there, on the kitchen counter, as if Anne had left them after trying to figure out how to pay everything and simply given up for the night. Matthew flipped through them carefully and felt his chest tighten with each paper. Electricity bill, 3 months overdue, with a notice of imminent disconnection. Water bill, 2 months overdue. Phone bill, already in collections, threat of suspension. Credit card bill, minimum payment overdue for 2 months. Health insurance bill, cancelled for non-payment. And underneath it all, the eviction notice. Matthew picked up the paper with slightly trembling hands. It was worse than he had imagined. It wasn't 3 months of arrears, it was 4 full months. Anne owed more than $5,000 in rent alone, and the final deadline to vacate the property was exactly 1 week away. 1 week. If Anne didn't pay in 1 week, she and Sarah would be on the street. Matthew sat down in the small kitchen chair and looked around. This was Sarah's world. This modest apartment with an empty refrigerator and a pile of overdue bills was all she knew as home, and Anne was about to lose even that. Next to the bills, Matthew noticed an open notebook. Anne's handwriting was neat, organized even in desperation. She had made lists, attempts to balance numbers that simply didn't add up. Jobs applied for this week, 15. Interviews secured, 2. Responses received, 0. Money remaining, 18 down. Need to pay by Monday, 1,347. Underneath that, she had written and erased different combinations of numbers several times, trying to find a mathematical solution to a problem that had no mathematical solution. Matthew turned the page and found something that made his heart stop. Things to sell. Living room TV, 40. Grandma's ring, 25. Blender, 10. Iron, 8. College books, 30. Anne was selling everything of value she had to try to keep a roof over her daughter's head. Even the college books that probably represented her abandoned dreams. Anne was selling everything of value she had to try to keep a roof over her daughter's head. Even the college books that probably represented her abandoned dreams. Matthew stood up and continued exploring the apartment. Sarah's room was small but lovingly arranged. The bed had a comforter that was clean but clearly old, faded from so many washes. The toys were few, most visibly used, probably bought at thrift stores. There was a small easel with some drawings. Matthew examined them and saw that Sarah drew with colored pencils that were worn down to almost no wood left. Even so, the drawings were full of color and joy. Drawings of her mother, drawings of flowers, drawings of houses with gardens. But it was in Anne's room that Matthew felt the true impact of the situation. The room was Spartan beyond necessity. A single bed with just a sheet and a pillowcase. There was no comforter, just a thin blanket that looked like it had seen better days. The dresser had 3 drawers, and when Matthew opened them, he saw that Anne had only the basics in clothes. Some pieces were visibly mended, others clearly had years of use. There were 2 blouses that seemed to be for work, carefully ironed and hung up. There were no perfumes, creams, jewelry, nothing to indicate that Anne allowed herself any personal luxury. Everything she had, everything she saved, went to Sarah. Matthew found more papers in one of the drawers. Resumes printed on cheap paper, rejection letters from companies, job application forms filled out by hand in neat handwriting. Anne wasn't idle. She was fighting with all her might to get out of that situation, but the doors kept closing in her face. There were also some diplomas. Matthew examined them carefully. Anne had been an excellent student. High grades, academic recognitions. She really was as smart as Sarah had said. Matthew sat on Anne's simple bed and looked around the empty room. Here was a woman who had sacrificed her dreams, her comfort, her future, all for her daughter, and yet she was losing the battle. He picked up his phone and called his personal assistant. "I need you to make some urgent transfers," he said, still sitting on Anne's bed. "Of course, Mr. Sullivan. To where?" Matthew gave the details of the building management, the utility companies, the credit card company. "Pay everything off, everything, and pay a year of rent in advance. Sir, that's over $20,000. I don't care about the amount. And do it in a way that it looks like an administrative error. Say the bills were already paid, that there was a mix-up in the system." "Understood, sir." Matthew hung up and called another number. "I need a full grocery delivery. The address is 247 Maple Street, apartment 12. "What kind of delivery, sir?" "Complete. Meat, chicken, fish, fruits, vegetables, dairy, cleaning supplies, personal hygiene products." He paused, looking around the empty apartment. "And candy for a child, lots of candy, and school supplies, and toys." "That will be several bags, sir." "It doesn't matter. Fill the fridge and the pantry." "Completely." After the calls, Matthew grabbed some clean clothes for Sarah and a small teddy bear he saw on her bed. Before leaving, he stopped once more in the kitchen and looked at the bills on the counter. Tomorrow, when Anne woke up, these bills would be paid. The fridge would be full. Sarah wouldn't have to eat pasta for days on end anymore. But Matthew knew this was just the beginning. Anne needed more than temporary financial help. She needed dignity, a future, a chance to rebuild her life, and he was going to make sure she had all of it. When Matthew returned to the hospital, Sarah was awake, playing with her dolls in the waiting room. "You came back?" She ran to hug him. "I promised I would. Did you bring me anything?" Matthew smiled and handed her the teddy bear. "Mr. Benny." Sarah hugged the bear tightly. "I missed him. I thought you'd like to have him here." Sarah sat on the sofa, holding the bear, and looked at Matthew seriously. "Matthew, did you go to our house?" "I did. I hope you don't mind." "I don't mind." She hesitated. "Did you see that things are really tough?" Matthew knelt to her level. "I did. But Sarah, I want you to know something. Your mom is one of the bravest people I've ever met. And you are too. Are we going to be homeless?" Her direct question caught him off guard. Sarah knew more than she let on. "No," Matthew said firmly. "You are not going to be homeless, I promise." Sarah looked him in the eyes, as if assessing whether she could trust that promise. "Really? Really? And you know why?" "Why?" "Because you're not alone anymore. Now you have me too." Sarah threw herself into his arms, still holding Mr. Benny. "Thank you, Matthew, for everything." Matthew hugged her, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. It wasn't just about money, it was about a family. It was about giving Sarah and Anne the chance to have the life they deserved. "You don't have to thank me," he said softly. "We're family now." And for the first time since meeting that brave little girl, Matthew was absolutely sure it was a promise he could keep. On the fourth day, Sarah was more cheerful. The news about Anne was getting better, and the girl seemed to have found a comfortable routine with Matthew. She had gotten used to his presence, and Matthew realized he had gotten used to hers as well. It was strange how quickly that child had become an essential part of his days. He would wake up thinking about what snack to bring her, what story to tell, how to make her smile. For 15 years, his life had revolved around meetings, investments, and profits. Now it revolved around a 5-year-old girl who carried a teddy bear everywhere. Sarah was sitting on the floor of the waiting room, surrounded by paper and crayons that Matthew had bought from the hospital gift shop. Her tongue stuck out of the corner of her mouth as she concentrated intensely on her drawing. "So what are you doing over there?" Matthew asked, sitting on the floor next to her. "It's a surprise," Sarah said without looking up from the paper, "but it's almost done." Matthew observed the vibrant colors scattered around her. Sarah had chosen yellow, blue, pinks, and green for her mysterious project. Her small hands held the crayons carefully, each stroke deliberate and thoughtful. "Can I at least see a little peek?" "No," Sarah laughed, covering the drawing with her body. "You have to wait." Matthew smiled. There was something deeply comforting in seeing Sarah act like a normal child, concerned only with her drawing and her surprise. For a few moments, she could forget where she was and why she was there. A nurse passed by and stopped to watch Sarah. "What concentration?" she commented. "Are you making a beautiful drawing?" Sarah nodded proudly. "It's for Matthew, because he's taking care of me." The nurse looked at Matthew with a smile. "He's lucky." "He is," Sarah agreed seriously. "He's very kind and he brings tasty food." When the nurse continued on her way, Matthew turned to Sarah. "You think I'm kind?" "Very kind. And funny too. And," she paused to think, "and you make me feel safe." Sarah's simple words hit Matthew in a way he didn't expect. When was the last time someone had said he made them feel safe? When was the last time his presence had meant comfort to someone? "I'm glad to hear that," he said softly. Sarah continued drawing for a few more minutes, her tongue still sticking out of the corner of her mouth. Finally, she put the last crayon aside and looked at her finished work. "Done," she announced. "Now you can see." She turned the paper around and Matthew felt the air leave his lungs. The drawing showed two figures holding hands in front of a large building, a small figure with brown hair and a pink dress, clearly Sarah, and a larger figure in a blue suit and dark hair, clearly him. Both figures had huge smiles drawn on their faces, but what impressed him most were the details. Sarah had drawn the hospital in the background, with its square windows and the red cross at the entrance. There were small flowers around their feet and a bright yellow sun in the corner of the paper. And at the top, in carefully formed letters, was written, "Matthew and Sarah, friends forever." "It's us," Sarah explained, as if Matthew couldn't see. "At the hospital. You're taking care of me, and I'm happy." Matthew carefully took the drawing, as if it were made of crystal. "Sarah, it's beautiful. Do you really like it?" "I like it more than any gift I've ever received." Sarah clapped her hands, beaming. "Now you have a memory of me too." Matthew looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "You said you knew Mommy when you were kids. That means you have memories together." Sarah pointed to the drawing. "Now we have memories together too. And when Mommy gets better and we go home, you can look at the drawing and remember me." The innocence of Sarah's observation hit Matthew like a punch to the gut. She was talking about leaving as if it were natural, as if after Anne got better they would simply walk out of his life and he would return to his previous routine. But Matthew realized, with a clarity that surprised him, that he didn't want them to leave his life. He didn't want to go back to his previous routine. In the last few days, caring for Sarah, he had discovered a part of himself he didn't even know existed. "Sarah," he said carefully, "who said you're leaving my life when your mum gets better?" Sarah blinked, confused. "Well, it's we go back home. You go back to your life. Isn't that how it works?" "Not necessarily." "What do you mean?" Matthew carefully folded the drawing and put it in the inner pocket of his jacket, right next to his heart. "Sometimes, when special people come into our lives, they stay forever." Sarah smiled slowly. "Do you think I'm special?" "Very special." "And will you still be my friend even when Mommy gets better?" "If you want me to, I'll be your friend forever." Sarah threw herself into his arms, squeezing him with all the strength her little arms could muster. "I do want that." Matthew hugged her back, feeling something warm spread through his chest. When was the last time a hug had meant so much? When was the last time he had felt truly needed in someone's life? They separated, and Sarah sat next to him on the sofa, snuggling against his arm. "Matthew?" "Yes. Can I ask you something?" "Of course." Sarah hesitated for a moment, playing with the edge of the blanket. "What was your family like when you were little?" Matthew thought for a moment. It was a simple question, but the answer was complicated. "Well, it was just me and my mum. My dad died when I was very young." "Just like me," Sarah said softly. "What do you mean?" Sarah looked down at her hands. "I don't have a dad either." Matthew felt his chest tighten. He knew Sarah had mentioned it was just her and her mom, but they had never specifically talked about her father. "Do you want to tell me about it?" Sarah shrugged, but Matthew realized it wasn't indifference. It was the resignation of a child who had learned to accept a painful reality. "There's not much to tell. I don't remember him. Nothing. Nothing at all. Mommy said he left when I was very little, like baby little." The casual way Sarah spoke about the abandonment made Matthew's heart break a little. "And your mum, did she tell you why he left?" Sarah shook her head. "She just says that sometimes people aren't ready to be parents, that it wasn't my fault." "Your mum is right. It definitely wasn't your fault." "I know," Sarah said with a maturity she shouldn't have, "but sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have a dad." "What do you mean?" Sarah snuggled closer to him. "At school, some boys talk about doing things with their dads. Playing catch, fishing, fixing things." She paused. "Mommy does those things with me too, but I don't know, it's different." Matthew felt a mixture of anger and sadness. Anger at the man who had abandoned Anne and Sarah, and sadness knowing that Sarah carried this void without even complaining. "Do you miss him, even without remembering?" Sarah thought for a long moment. "I don't know if I miss him. How can I miss someone I never knew?" She looked at Matthew. "But sometimes I miss the idea of having a dad." Sarah's brutal honesty left Matthew speechless for a moment. "That makes sense," he said finally. "Mommy always says our family might be small, but it's complete, that we don't need anyone else to be happy." "And do you believe that?" "I do. Mommy and I are happy." Sarah smiled. "And now you're here too, so our family got a little bigger." Matthew felt his eyes sting slightly. "You consider me family?" "Well," Sarah thought for a moment, "I already consider you a friend, a very special friend. It's good that you're with me while Mommy recovers." Matthew thought about his own life. For years, it had been just him. He had built an empire, but he had built it alone. There were people who worked for him, people who depended on him financially, but no one who truly cared about him as a person. "It's true," he said. "It's really good to have a friend like you too." Sarah smiled and snuggled next to him again. "Matthew, do you think my dad will ever come back?" The question caught him off guard. Sarah had spoken about her father with such acceptance that Matthew thought she had completely processed the situation. "I don't know, Sarah. Why? Would you want him to come back?" Sarah was quiet for a long time. "Sometimes I think about it. Like, if he showed up at our door one day," she played with Mr. Benny's fur. "But then I get confused." "Confused how?" "If he came back, he'd be a stranger to me. I wouldn't know how to be his daughter, and—" She hesitated. "And I'd be scared he would leave again." Matthew's heart broke hearing a 5-year-old child process abandonment with such clarity. "Those are very valid concerns. And there's something else," Sarah continued. "If he came back now, after so long, it would be because he wants something, not because he misses us." Sarah's perception was devastatingly accurate. "Sarah, can I tell you something?" "Of course." Matthew turned to face her. "Theo's, the man who left, missed the chance to know the most amazing girl in the world, and that's his loss, not yours." Sarah smiled, but there was still sadness in her eyes. "Do you really think so?" "I'm sure of it. Anyone who had the chance to be your father and chose not to is the one who lost something precious." "Thank you," Sarah said softly. They sat in silence for a few minutes, Sarah processing the conversation, Matthew processing how much that child had changed his perspective on everything. "Matthew?" "Yes. Do you think that's why I liked you so much? Because you're a very special friend who showed up when I needed you most?" The question was innocent, but it hit Matthew deeply. He had never really been needed in someone's life in this way. He had never been the person someone sought out when they were scared or needed comfort. "Maybe," he said honestly. "And maybe that's why I liked being here with you so much. Because you taught me what it means to be a true friend." Sarah smiled radiantly. "You're the best friend I've ever had." Matthew felt a strong emotion grow in his chest. "You're a very special friend to me too. And what if I wanted to keep being your friend, even after your mum gets better? Like, forever?" "Like, forever?" Sarah thought for a moment. Serious. "I would like that very much. But you'd have to talk to Mommy too." "And if she agreed," Sarah smiled slowly, "then it would be perfect to have Mommy back and to have you as a friend forever." Matthew pulled her into a hug, holding her against his chest. For the first time in his adult life, he had a clear vision of what he wanted for the future. And that vision included a woman he had loved as a child and the extraordinary daughter she had raised. Sarah? Thank you for the drawing. I'll keep it forever. And thank you for being my friend, for being here with me while Mommy recovers. You're so much better than anyone I could have imagined. Matthew kissed the top of her head, feeling a determination grow inside him. Sarah deserved to have a father figure. Anne deserved to have someone to support her, and he deserved to have a family. Now he just needed to figure out how to make it all happen. The seventh day brought subtle but significant changes. Matthew arrived at the hospital as usual, carrying breakfast for Sarah, and found her already awake, sitting in the chair next to her mother's bed. Sarah was no longer in the waiting room. The doctors had allowed her to spend more time in the ICU room, and Matthew immediately noticed the difference in her behavior. There was a different calm in her movements, a restrained hope that hadn't been there in the previous days. "Good morning," he said softly, entering the room. Sarah looked up from the drawing pad on her lap and smiled. "Good morning, Matthew. Look," she pointed to her mother. "The doctors said she's better today." Matthew approached the bed and looked at Anne. She was still unconscious, surrounded by medical equipment, but there was something different. Her breathing seemed more natural, less forced. Her skin had a healthier color. What exactly did the doctors say? Sarah put her colored pencil aside and turned to him. "Dr. Harrison came earlier and said Mommy is responding better to the treatments. And that—" She paused, as if wanting to make sure she remembered the exact words, "and that she could wake up at any moment." The words made Matthew's heart race. At any moment. That's what he said, that her brain is healing, and now it's just a matter of waiting for her to wake up. Matthew sat in the chair on the other side of the bed, watching Anne's serene face. After a week of uncertainty, there was finally concrete hope. "How are you feeling with this news?" Sarah took her mother's hand between her small ones. Happy, but also nervous. Nervous why? What if she wakes up and doesn't remember me? The doctors said that sometimes happens when people hit their heads. Matthew saw the genuine concern in her eyes. "Sarah, your mom could never forget you. You are the most important thing in her life. Are you sure?" "I'm absolutely sure." Sarah nodded and turned her attention back to her drawing pad. Matthew noticed she had developed a routine. She would arrive early, talk softly to her mother, draw in silence, and hold her hand for long periods. "So what are you drawing today?" Sarah turned the pad for him to see. It was a drawing of 3 people, a woman lying in a bed, a girl holding her hand, and a man standing beside them, all smiling. "It's for when Mommy wakes up," Sarah explained. "Me, you, and her, together." The simplicity of the drawing and the hope it represented touched Matthew deeply. "It's a beautiful drawing. I want it to be the first thing Mommy sees when she opens her eyes." Matthew watched Sarah work on the details of the drawing. She had become quieter in the last few days, not in the sad way she was at the beginning, but in a contemplative way, as if she were processing everything that had happened and preparing for what was to come. A nurse came in to check the equipment. "How is she today?" Matthew asked. "Much better. Her vital signs are excellent, and we had some positive neurological responses during the night." "What kind of responses?" "Eye movements under the eyelids, small finger movements when we stimulated her. They are very encouraging signs." Sarah looked at the nurse with interest. "Does that mean she's trying to wake up?" "Exactly that, sweetie. Her body is preparing to awaken." When the nurse left, Sarah turned to Matthew. "Do you think she can hear me?" "The doctors say so." "Why?" "I've been talking to her every day. I tell her about you, about the hospital, about how you've been taking care of me." Sarah looked at her mother. "I want her to know that you're a very special friend." Matthew felt a strong emotion grow in his chest. The way Sarah had included him in the narrative of her mother's recovery showed how much he had become a part of their lives. "What else do you tell her?" "That you brought Mr. Benny for me, that you always bring tasty food, that you let me draw." Sarah paused. "And that you knew her when you were kids." "You told her that." "I did. I thought she'd be happy to know you reconnected." Matthew imagined Anne hearing about the reunion through her daughter's words. Did she remember him? Would she be happy or surprised to know he was there? Dr. Harrison entered the room, interrupting his thoughts. "How are we today?" Sarah immediately brightened. "Dr. Harrison, is Mommy going to wake up today?" The doctor smiled and checked the chart. "I can't promise it will be today specifically, but all indications show that it will be very soon. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. The important thing is that the awakening process has already begun." "How do we know that?" "The tests show increased brain activity, the involuntary movements are more frequent, and the response to external stimuli has improved significantly." Matthew leaned forward. "Is there anything we should do differently?" "Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Talking to her, being present, keeping the environment calm and positive." Dr. Harrison looked at Sarah. "You've been an excellent nurse for your mom." Sarah smiled proudly. "I take very good care of her." "That's evident, and I'm sure she knows it." After the doctor left, Sarah returned to her drawing, but Matthew noticed she was more agitated. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the colored pencil. "Sarah, are you okay?" She stopped drawing and looked at him. "What if when Mommy wakes up, she doesn't like you being here?" The question surprised him. "Why would you think she wouldn't like it?" "Because she doesn't know you." "I mean, she knew you when you were kids, but that was a long time ago." Sarah bit her lip. "What if she thinks it's weird that you took care of me?" Matthew realized Sarah was worried about her mother's reaction. She had grown accustomed to his presence, but now that Anne was about to wake up, the reality of the situation was becoming more complex. "Sarah, can I tell you a secret?" She nodded. "I'm nervous about it too." "Really? Really? It's natural to be nervous when we meet someone important again after a long time. But you'll stay, won't you? Even if she's confused at first." Matthew looked at the little girl who had become so important to him in such a short time. "I'm not going anywhere, Sarah, no matter what happens." Sarah smiled and returned to her drawing, but this time her hands were steady. They spent the rest of the morning in comfortable silence. Sarah drew, occasionally talking softly to her mother. Matthew read emails on his phone, but his attention was always divided between work and watching Anne. Around noon, Sarah put her colored pencil aside and took her mother's hand more firmly. "Mommy," she said softly, "I know you're getting ready to wake up, and I want you to know that everything is okay. You don't have to worry about me. Matthew took very good care of me." Matthew stopped reading his emails and watched Sarah talk to her mother. "He's very kind, Mommy. And he knew you when you were little. You lived in the same neighborhood." Sarah caressed her mother's hand. "He told me you were friends." Matthew felt his eyes sting as he heard Sarah setting the stage for the reunion. "And Mommy, I made lots of drawings for you. They're all here waiting." Sarah picked up the pile of drawings from the bedside table. "This one is my favorite. It's for when you wake up and we're all together." There was a moment of silence, and then Matthew saw something that made his heart stop. Anne's fingers moved, just slightly, but enough for Sarah to notice. "Matthew," Sarah whispered, excited. "Did you see?" "I did." They watched in silence, waiting for another movement. And then it happened again. Anne's fingers gently closed around Sarah's hand. Sarah looked at Matthew with shining eyes. "She's listening to me." "She is." Sarah turned back to her mother. "Mommy, I know you're there, and when you're ready, we'll be here waiting. Me and Matthew together." Matthew approached and placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Together," he repeated softly. And there, in the silence of the hospital room, with the equipment humming softly in the background, the three remained connected by an invisible thread of hope, love, and the promise that, very soon, the family that had formed so unexpectedly would finally be complete. It was a grey Tuesday when it happened. Matthew had been gone for just 15 minutes to get coffee when he heard Sarah scream his name down the hall. "Matthew, Matthew, come quick!" He dropped the coffee on the floor and ran back to the room. When he entered, he saw Sarah beside the bed, holding her mother's hand, tears streaming down her face, but with a radiant smile. "She opened her eyes," Sarah said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mommy opened her eyes and looked at me." Matthew approached the bed and saw Anne with her eyes half open, still confused, but clearly conscious. She blinked slowly, trying to focus on her surroundings. "Mommy," Sarah whispered. Can you hear me?" Anne turned her head slightly in the direction of her daughter's voice. Her lips moved, but no sound came out initially. "Sarah." Her voice was hoarse, almost inaudible, but it was real. Sarah sobbed with relief. "Yes, Mommy, it's me, I'm here." Anne tried to smile, a weak but genuine movement. Her eyes scanned her daughter's face, as if memorizing every detail. "Are you okay?" she managed to say, each word costing a visible effort. "I'm okay, Mommy. I'm okay." Matthew stayed a few steps back, not wanting to interfere with the moment between mother and daughter. But Anne, perhaps drawn by the movement, turned her head slightly in his direction. For a few seconds, she just looked at him, confused. Matthew saw the exact moment recognition dawned. Her eyes widened slightly, and she blinked several times, as if trying to confirm she was seeing correctly. "Matthew!" Her voice was a whisper full of disbelief. He took a step forward. "Hi, Anne. I can't believe it. You're here." Anne tried to move but was clearly still very weak. Her hands trembled slightly, and Matthew realized she was struggling to process everything that was happening. She paused, breathing with difficulty. "How long?" "1 week," Matthew answered gently. "You had an accident, but everything's okay now." Anne looked at Sarah again, then at Matthew, trying to understand how he was there. "How did you—" Sarah leaned over the bed. "Mommy, Matthew helped me. When you got hurt, I didn't know what to do. And he showed up. He took care of me while you were sleeping." Anne closed her eyes for a moment, and Matthew saw tears streaming down her cheeks. "Sarah, my girl, don't cry, Mommy. It's all okay now." Anne opened her eyes again and looked directly at Matthew. There were so many emotions in her gaze: confusion, gratitude, surprise, and something else he couldn't identify. "Matthew," she said, her voice a little stronger now. "After all these years, I never forgot you, Anne." The words came out simple, direct, but loaded with meaning. Anne looked at him for a long moment, and Matthew saw she was trying to reconcile the boy she had known with the man standing before her. "You took care of Sarah?" "I did. She's an amazing girl." Anne smiled weakly but proudly. She's my everything." "I know." A nurse entered the room, drawn by the commotion. "Oh my goodness, Mrs. Miller, it's so good to see you awake." Anne turned her head with difficulty. "How long have I been—" "1 week," the nurse replied, quickly checking the equipment. "But you're recovering very well. I'll call Dr. Harrison." When the nurse left, Anne turned her attention back to Sarah. "My princess, were you alone?" Sarah shook her head vigorously. "No, Mommy. Matthew stayed with me the whole time. He brought food, let me draw, and even brought and even Benny from our apartment." Anne looked at Matthew with an expression that mixed gratitude and something that looked like vulnerability. "You went to our apartment?" Matthew nodded, realizing Anne was worried about what he had seen there. Just to get a few things for Sarah. He didn't mention the bills, the eviction, or the empty fridge. It wasn't the time for that. Anne closed her eyes briefly, and Matthew realized she was remembering the circumstances they lived in. "Matthew, Anne," he interrupted her gently, "don't worry about anything right now. Just focus on getting better." She looked at him for a long moment. "You were always kind," she said finally. "Even when we were kids." Matthew felt something stir in his chest upon hearing that she remembered his personality from childhood. "You remember?" "I remember a lot of things." Anne smiled faintly. "You always stood up for the smaller kids when someone picked on them. And you always shared your snack when someone forgot theirs." Matthew was surprised she remembered such specific details. "Do you remember the day you fell from the tree in Mrs. Peterson's yard?" Anne laughed softly, a sound that made Sarah smile. "And you helped me get home even with a scraped knee. Your mum got mad at me for letting you climb the tree, but then she made those cookies you loved." Matthew smiled at the memory. "Chocolate chip cookies. You remember. I remember a lot of things too." They fell silent for a moment, both lost in memories of a simpler time. Sarah watched them with curiosity. "So you were really good friends, weren't you?" Anne nodded slowly. "We were. Matthew was one of the best friends I ever had." Matthew felt his chest tighten with the emotion in her voice. "The feeling is mutual." Dr. Harrison entered the room, interrupting the moment. "Mrs. Miller, what a joy to see you awake. How are you feeling?" "Tired," Anne answered honestly, "and a little confused. That's completely normal. You suffered a significant head trauma. The fact that you're conscious and communicating so well is excellent." The doctor performed some basic tests, asking Anne to move her fingers, follow a light with her eyes, and answer a few simple questions. She passed them all with ease. "How long until I can go home?" Anne asked. "It's still too early to say. We want to keep you under observation for a few days. Make sure your recovery continues to progress well." Dr. Harrison smiled. "But the signs are very encouraging." When the doctor left, Anne looked at Sarah. "Come here, my girl." Sarah approached and Anne managed to lift her arm enough to touch her daughter's face. "I'm sorry for scaring you. It wasn't your fault, Mommy. The car came too fast." Anne closed her eyes, clearly remembering the accident. "I remember pushing you and then nothing." "You saved me," Sarah said simply. Anne opened her eyes and looked at Matthew. "And you saved her?" Matthew shook his head. "Sarah saved herself. She was the bravest kid I've ever met." Anne smiled proudly. "She's always been brave." Sarah snuggled beside the bed. "Mommy, I made drawings for you. Want to see?" "Of course I do." Sarah picked up the pile of drawings and began to show each one, explaining in detail what she had drawn. Anne listened attentively, asking questions and praising each work of art. Matthew watched the interaction between mother and daughter, feeling a mix of joy and melancholy. Joy to see Anne awake and Sarah radiant. Melancholy because he knew that now that Anne was awake, his role in their lives would change. As if Anne could read his thoughts. She looked at him. "Matthew?" "Yes." "Thank you." The words were simple, but the emotion behind them was deep. "Thank you for taking care of my girl. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to. It was a privilege." Anne studied him for a moment. "You've changed a lot," she said finally, "but in essence, you're still the same kind Matthew I knew." Matthew felt his eyes sting slightly. "You haven't changed either. You're still the same brave and determined Anne." Sarah looked between the two of them. "Now that Mommy's awake, the three of us can be friends together." Anne and Matthew looked at each other, both smiling at the simplicity of Sarah's perspective. "That would be nice," Anne said softly, her eyes still fixed on Matthew. "Yes, it would," he agreed. And there, in the hospital room, with Sarah between them and the afternoon sun finally breaking through the grey clouds outside the window, Matthew knew this reunion was just the beginning of something that would change their lives forever. Anne had been awake for 3 days and her recovery was surprising the doctors. She could sit up in bed for longer periods, talk without difficulty, and even laughed a few times at the stories Sarah told about her days at the hospital. Matthew had settled into a comfortable routine. He would arrive in the morning, bring breakfast for Sarah, talk with Anne about her recovery and childhood memories, and remain there as a constant, comforting presence. That Thursday afternoon, Sarah was showing Anne her latest drawings when a nurse appeared at the door. "Mrs. Miller, there's a man here wanting to visit you. He says he's—" The nurse hesitated, looking at Sarah. "He says he's the child's father." The silence that followed was deafening. Anne paled visibly, her breathing becoming faster. Sarah looked confusedly from the nurse to her mother, then to Matthew. "My dad?" Sarah asked, her voice small and uncertain. Anne closed her eyes for a moment, trying to compose herself. "What's his name?" she asked the nurse, though she clearly already knew the answer. "David Carter." Anne nodded slowly, as if a part of her always knew this moment would come. Can you tell him to wait a few minutes? I need to talk to my daughter first." When the nurse left, Anne looked at Sarah, who was visibly confused. "My princess, do you remember when I told you your father left when you were very little?" Sarah nodded. "Well, he's here. He wants to meet you." "But I don't remember him," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know, sweetie, and that's okay. You don't have to do anything you don't want to." Matthew, who had remained silent, felt a tension grow in the room. He could see the fear in Anne's eyes, Sarah's confusion, and a part of him wanted to protect them both from what was coming. "Taihan," he said softly. "Do you want me to leave?" Anne looked at him, and for a moment, Matthew saw pure vulnerability in her eyes. "No, please, stay, if that's possible." Sarah approached the bed and took her mother's hand. "Mommy, are you scared?" Anne hesitated, clearly not wanting to frighten her daughter, but also not wanting to lie. "A little, yes." "Then I'm scared too." Anne stroked her daughter's hair. "You don't need to be scared. He can't hurt us. And if you don't want to talk to him, you don't have to." "But are you going to talk to him?" "I have to, just to understand why he's here after all this time." Sarah nodded, though she still seemed apprehensive. "You can let him in," Anne said finally. Matthew positioned himself discreetly in a corner of the room, close enough to intervene if necessary, but far enough not to seem intrusive. The nurse returned with a man in his early 30s. He was tall, with brown hair and blue eyes. He wore casual but neat clothes and carried a small bouquet of flowers. David stopped at the entrance of the room, his eyes going from Anne to Sarah, and Matthew saw the moment he truly absorbed the sight of the daughter he had abandoned. "Anne," he said, his voice hesitant, "I heard about the accident. I came to see how you are, and to meet my daughter." The word "my" made Anne visibly tense. Sarah partially hid behind her mother, watching the man with curiosity and apprehension. "Hi," David said, trying to sound casual. "Sarah, right? You've grown so much." Sarah looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "Are you my dad?" The direct question, asked with the brutal honesty of a child, made David blink several times. "I am. I've missed you a lot," Sarah frowned. "But you left when I was a baby. How can you miss someone you don't know?" Matthew had to suppress a sad smile at Sarah's flawless logic. David clearly hadn't expected to be questioned by a 5-year-old. "Well, He looked to Anne for help, but she remained silent. "I made a mistake. A very big mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "Sarah," Anne finally intervened, "why don't you go get some juice from the cafeteria with Matthew? I need to talk with David first." Sarah hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. It's just for a few minutes." Matthew approached and extended his hand to Sarah. "Let's see if they have that apple juice you like." Sarah took his hand, but before leaving the room she looked at David again. "You're not going to make my mum cry, are you?" The question hit David like a punch. He looked at the girl, then at Anne, then back at Sarah. "No, I'm not going to make your mum cry." Sarah nodded and left with Matthew, but he could hear Anne say before they even reached the hallway, "David, you made that promise before and didn't keep it." Matthew took Sarah to the cafeteria, but she was clearly distracted. "Matthew, he seems normal," she said while stirring her juice with the straw. "What do you mean?" I don't know. I imagined that people who abandoned their children were different, scarier." Matthew was impressed by her insight. "Sometimes people do bad things, even when they seem normal." "Do you think he's a bad person?" Matthew thought carefully about the answer. "I don't know if he's bad, but I know he hurt you and your mum when he left." Sarah nodded. "Mommy never spoke ill of him. She just said he wasn't ready to be a dad. Your mum is a very wise person." "She is." Sarah took a sip of her juice. "Matthew, do you think he wants to stay now?" "I don't know, Sarah." "What would you think if he did?" Sarah thought for a long moment. "I don't know if I'd want that. He's a stranger to me, and our life is good the way it is." When they returned to the room 20 minutes later, David was still there, but the atmosphere was tense. Anne had tears in her eyes, and David looked frustrated. "Mommy!" Sarah ran to the side of the bed. "Are you okay?" Anne quickly wiped her eyes. I'm fine, Princess." David looked at Sarah with an expression that mixed regret and hope. "Sarah, I know this is confusing for you, but I'd like to start getting to know you." Sarah looked at him directly. "Why?" "Because you're my daughter." "But you left. Why did you come back now?" David looked at Anne again, but she maintained a neutral expression. "Because I've grown up. Because I realized the mistake I made." "What mistake?" "Leaving when you were born." Sarah processed this for a moment. "And what changed?" David seemed not to expect such direct questions. Well, I have a better job now. I'm more mature, I can take care of you. But I don't need you to take care of me. Mommy does. And Matthew has been helping me too. David looked at Matthew for the first time and really noticing him. And who are you? Before Matthew could answer, Anne said, Matthew is a very dear friend. He took care of Sarah while I was unconscious. A friend, David repeated, and there was something in his tone that Matthew didn't like. Yes, Anne said firmly. Her friend who was here when Sarah needed him. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Finally, Sarah spoke. You can visit sometimes, if Mommy lets you, but I don't want you to live with us. David seemed surprised by her honesty. Why not? Because I don't know you and because you hurt Mommy when you left. Anne pulled Sarah closer. Sarah, you don't have to. It's okay, Mommy, he asked. I answered. David looked at Anne. Anne, can we talk in private? Anne hesitated, then looked at Matthew. Matthew, can you take Sarah for a walk? Of course. As they left, Anne turned to David. Just say what you want, David. I want a chance. A chance to be a father to Sarah. 5 years later. I know I waited a long time, but... You didn't wait, David. You ran. Anne's voice was controlled, but there was steel in it. You disappeared when you found out I was pregnant. You didn't answer my calls, you didn't help with anything. I was young, Anne. I was scared, and I wasn't. Anne leaned forward despite the pain. I was 22, I was studying, and suddenly I found myself alone and pregnant. You think I wasn't scared? David lowered his head. I know you went through a lot. You don't know anything about what I went through. Anne took a deep breath. You didn't see the sleepless nights when she was sick. You didn't see her asking why other kids had dads and she didn't. You didn't see anything we went through. But now I want to see. I want to be part of her life. Anne studied him for a long moment. Why now, David? What really changed? David hesitated. I recently ended a relationship, and it made me think about family, about what's important. Anne closed her eyes, clearly trying to control her anger. So you're here because you felt lonely. It's not just that. Yes, it is. Anne opened her eyes and looked directly at him. You're not here because you miss Sarah. You're here because you want something to fill a void in your life. Anne, that's not fair. Fair, Anne laughed bitterly. You want to talk about what's fair. Is it fair for Sarah to have to deal with this now, when we finally have stability? Stability? Anne, I know about your financial difficulties. I can help. Anne tensed. How do you know about that? I asked around. I heard you were unemployed, that things were tough. And you think you can just show up now with money and solve everything. I can help Sarah have a better life. Sarah already has a good life. She has love. She has security. She has a mother who would do anything for her. But she also has the right to have a father. Anne was quiet for a long moment. You're right, she said finally. Sarah has the right to know her father, but that will happen on my terms. David leaned forward. What terms? Supervised visits. For a few hours, at most. And if Sarah says she doesn't want to, you leave and don't come back. Anne, those are the terms, David. Take it or leave it. David sighed. All right, I accept. And David? Anne looked him in the eye. If you hurt her again, if you disappear again, I will make sure you never get near her again. Understood? David nodded. Understood. When Matthew and Sarah returned, the tension in the room was palpable. How did it go? Sarah asked. Anne smiled, but Matthew could tell it was forced. We talked. David will be able to visit you sometimes, if you want. Sarah looked from Anne to David. Can I think about it? Of course you can, Princess. David stood up. Anne, thank you for the chance. Sarah. He looked at his daughter. I hope we can get to know each other better. Sarah nodded politely, but stayed by her mother's side. After David left, Anne sank back onto the bed, clearly exhausted. Mommy, are you okay? Sarah asked. I am, sweetie. Just tired. Matthew approached the bed. Anne, if you need anything. Anne looked at him, and Matthew saw genuine gratitude in her eyes. Thank you for being here, for taking care of her. Always, Sarah climbed onto the bed and snuggled next to her mother. "Mommy, is our life going to change now?" Anne hugged her daughter. "Not if you don't want it to, Princess. Our life is ours, and no one is going to change that without our permission." Matthew watched the mother and daughter embrace, and he knew that, regardless of the shadows from the past that had appeared, he would do everything possible to protect the peace they had found. 2 weeks after the incident with David, Anne was finally discharged from the hospital. Matthew had insisted on taking them home, and Sarah was thrilled to finally leave the hospital. On the way, Anne was quiet, looking out the car window. Matthew noticed she was nervous. "Is everything okay?" he asked. I don't know what I'll find at the apartment. Before the accident, things were difficult." Sarah, in the back seat, held Mr. Benny and watched the conversation. "Mommy, Matthew said he already took care of everything." Anne looked at Matthew with confusion. "Took care of what?" "We'll talk later," he said simply. When they arrived at the building on Maple Street, Anne paused at the apartment entrance, hesitating before putting the key in the lock. Mommy, you can open it," Sarah said impatiently. "I want to show you my new drawings." Anne took a deep breath and opened the door. What she saw left her speechless. The fridge was clearly full. There were folded and organized grocery bags on the counter. The pile of bills she had left on the table was gone. The apartment was spotless, but more than that, there was an air of order and peace that didn't exist before. Anne walked slowly to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. It was filled with fresh food, fruits, vegetables, meats, dairy. The pantry, which had been practically empty, was now overflowing with groceries. She turned to Matthew, tears starting to form in her eyes. "You did all this?" "I took care of everything," Matthew replied simply. "But the bills, the rent, all taken care of." Anne leaned against the counter, clearly trying to process the magnitude of what Matthew had done. "Matthew, I can't accept this. It's too much." "Anne, you almost died." Sarah was left alone. "It was the least I could do." "But no buts." Matthew approached her. "You would have done the same for me if the situations were reversed." Anne looked at him for a long moment. "I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't have to. We're friends." Sarah, who had run to her room to check on her toys, returned to the kitchen. "Mommy, Matthew also bought new art supplies, and there are new books on my shelf." Anne looked at Matthew with a mixture of gratitude and something he couldn't identify. "You thought of everything." I tried to imagine what Sarah would need to feel at home again. Anne sat in the kitchen chair, clearly emotional. "Guys, why are you doing all this for us?" Matthew sat in the chair across from her. "Because you've become important to me. Because Sarah taught me things about myself I didn't know. And because—" He hesitated, then continued. "And because you were always special to me, Anne, even when we were kids." Anne looked at him with surprise. Really? Really?" Sarah, realizing the adults were having a serious conversation, sat on the floor and started to draw, but Matthew noticed she was listening. Anne was quiet for a moment, then stood up. "There's something I want to show you." She went to her room and came back carrying a small old box. It was made of wood, clearly handmade, with some signs of use but well preserved. "What is that?" Anne sat down again and placed the box on the table. "Childhood memories. My mom helped me make this box when I was 8. She said I should keep the most important things in it." She opened the box carefully. Inside were small objects, some colored stones, a yellowed note, a beaded bracelet, and some old photographs. Anne picked up one of the notes and smiled. "Do you remember when you wrote me this note?" Matthew took the paper and read, "Anne, thank you for lending me your red pencil. You're the coolest girl in the class." "Matthew," he laughed. "My handwriting was terrible. I kept it because it was the first note anyone ever wrote to me saying I was cool." Matthew felt something stir in his chest. "You kept this all these years?" "I kept a lot of things." Anne showed him other objects. A small seashell they had found on a school trip, a button from a shirt he had lost and she had found, some dried flowers. "Anne, I didn't know that I had kept these things." She smiled sadly. "You were my first love, Matthew. A childhood love, but love nonetheless." Matthew looked at her with surprise. Seriously, very serious. Anne took the last thing from the box, and this is my favorite. It was a small black and white photograph, clearly taken by an adult. It showed two children, a boy and a girl, holding hands, smiling at the camera. The boy had dark hair and a mischievous smile. The girl had long hair and bright eyes. Matthew took the photo carefully. Wow, how old were we here? You were 9, I was 8. It was on the last day of school before you moved. Matthew studied the photo. He vaguely remembered the day, but seeing the image brought back more memories. Did you ask your mom to take this picture? I did. I wanted to have a memory of you. Anne. It was a good time, she said softly, looking at the photo. Simple, but good. Matthew looked at the woman before him, seeing traces of the girl in the photograph, but also seeing all the strength and determination she had developed over the years. It was the best time of my childhood, he said honestly. Sarah, who had been quiet, approached. Can I see? Anne showed her the photo. Yours, is that you and Matthew when you were kids? It is. Were you boyfriend and girlfriend? Sarah asked with typical childhood frankness. Anne and Matthew laughed. Not exactly, Anne said, but we were very special friends. Sarah studied the photo. You look happy. We were, Matthew said. Anne put the photo and the other objects back in the box. Thank you for letting me show you this. Thank you for keeping all of this. They were silent for a moment, both lost in memories and the weight of their reunion. Finally, Matthew broke the silence. Anne, I have a proposal for you. What kind of proposal? We need someone in HR at the company. I want you to come work with me. Anne looked at him with surprise. Matthew, you don't have to... It's not charity. It's a real job with a real salary. You're smart, organized, and you have experience with people. You'd be perfect for the position. Anne hesitated. I don't know if that would be appropriate. Working for you after everything you've done for us. You wouldn't be working for me specifically. The company is large. You'd have your own department, your own responsibilities. Sarah looked between the two of them. Mommy, does that mean you'll have a new job? Maybe, Princess. That would be good. You'd be less worried. Anne smiled at her daughter, then looked at Matthew. I need to think. Of course, there's no rush. Anne was quiet for a moment, then smiled. You know, I saw you on TV a few times over the years, when there was news about your business. And what did you think? I felt proud. I thought, I knew that man when he was a boy who shared his snack with me. She paused. But I always thought you'd never remember me. Matthew looked directly into her eyes. You were impossible to forget. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah broke the moment. Mommy, can I have a snack? I'm hungry. Of course, Princess. In the days that followed, a new routine was established. Anne accepted the job at Matthew's company. David began his supervised visits with Sarah on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and Sarah went back to school. The visits with David were cordial but tense. Sarah was polite but distant, treating him more like an acquaintance than a father. David tried his good, but it was obvious he was struggling to connect with a daughter he didn't know. How was it with your dad today? Anne asked after one of the visits. It was okay, Sarah replied. He took me to the park and bought me ice cream, but it's kind of weird. Weird how? He keeps trying to be funny, but I don't get his jokes, and he doesn't know what kind of ice cream I like. Anne hugged her daughter. Give him time, Princess. And give yourself time too. Okay, but Matthew is still my favorite friend. Anne smiled. Matthew will always be special to us. 2 weeks after Anne started her new job, Matthew suggested a walk in the park on a Saturday afternoon. It was a beautiful spring day, and Sarah was excited to show Matthew how she had learned to ride her bike. They walked along the park paths, Sarah riding her bike ahead of them, Anne and Matthew talking about work and life. How are you feeling about everything? Matthew asked. Honestly, for the first time in years, I feel like I have control over my life, Anne smiled. The job is challenging but good. Sarah is adjusting well to school, and David, well, he's trying. And us. Anne looked at him. Us. Our friendship, everything that happened. Anne stopped walking and turned to him. Our friendship is the best thing that's happened to me in a long time, Matthew. Sarah braked her bike and ran back to them. Why did you guys stop? Just talking, Anne said. Sarah took Matthew's hand. Matthew, can I tell you something? Of course. Sarah looked at him seriously. Thank you for showing up in our lives. I hope you never leave again. Matthew knelt to her level, touched by the girl's sincerity. I'm here to stay, Sarah, forever, if you'll have me. Sarah beamed and hugged him. I will. Matthew looked at Anne over Sarah's head and saw tears in her eyes. I want that too, Anne said softly. There, in the park, with Sarah between them and the afternoon sun filtering through the trees, Matthew knew he had found something that no amount of wealth in the world could buy. It wasn't just success or achievement, it was belonging. It was genuine affection. It was mutual respect. It was a family that had been formed not by blood or obligation, but by choice, by love, by three lives that found each other at the right moment and decided to rebuild themselves together. And for the first time in his adult life, Matthew Sullivan felt truly at home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.